Hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel and welcome to my reading wrap up for July, August and September. So in the last 3 months I read 21 books, and both in July and September I read 9, but in August I read 3 because I was like traveling, I was on holiday, I was not having time to read, and yeah, I just honestly mostly I didn't have time. Like I wanted to read, but I didn't have time. So, I read less than I usually do, but I still have 21 books to talk about, and that is still a lot of books to talk about in one video. So, let's get started. The first book I am gonna tell you about is Kingdom of Ash. I forgot how heavy this thing was. And this was the first book I finished in July, and this is the 7th, I think, and last book in the Throne of Glass series, which is a fantasy series. And obviously I'm not gonna get into the plot of this because it's the last in the series and I would like spoil everything. But basically I was like really excited with what was happening in the first like 200 pages maybe, but then I was kind of bored for, let's say, 600 pages, which, wasn't fun, wasn't what I was here for. And yeah, I felt like it was, dragging a lot. It was too long. But then the end, the last maybe like 150 to 200 pages, was exciting again. Like I was invested. I was, like I said, excited. I wanted to keep reading. I wanted to know what was happening. And I did like the way that it's like wrapped up. And this book actually did make me cry because the one character I really cared about was suffering. And yeah, but like I was saying, I was bored for like half of the book or more than half of the book, which is not ideal. Is not what I was here for. And yeah, I just feel like it was too long because in the middle section, not that much was happening to like need this many pages, So yeah, I like the actual end and I like the beginning, but it was just sadly okay. And I think I gave it 3.5 stars. Then I read Dusk or Dark or Dawn or Day, which was a fantasy kind of mystery. And I didn't really know like anything going into that book, but it's from an author that I've read a lot of things from and that I like almost everything that I read from that author. And in this one we're following a girl called Jenna, and she was actually a ghost, but she had died before her supposed time to die was, so she had to remain as a ghost until she had collected, either lived all the time that she had to like live until she got to the time where she was supposed to die, or if she collected that time. And they can like take time from the living, and the way they do that is like, imagine like a ghost takes a year from like someone, so they have to live, they have to be like in the world a year less, and the living person gets like an extra year to live. So like they don't actually take the time, like they give the time, but at the same time they take the time. You know what I mean? So yeah, she's, just trying to get her time in a way that helps people. And then she realizes that a bunch of her ghost friends are disappearing, they're going missing. And so she and some other friends are trying to figure out what is happening. And it was definitely fun, but it wasn't anything like crazy, anything that I was like super excited to be reading. But like it was a fun time and it was kind of a wholesome time in a way, and I did enjoy it, but again, it wasn't anything crazy. So I also gave this one 3.5 stars. And then I have read 3 books from the same series, not like back to back, but in these 3 months I read 3 books from the same series, and they were the Night Stalker, the Death Sculptor, and One by One, which are books 3, 4, and 5, I think, in the Robert Hunter series, which is a like mystery thriller series where we follow Robert Hunter, who is a detective. And so in the Night Stalker, they find a female victim who has like her mouth and her genitals like sewn shut, and there was something like left inside of her body that was crazy. And then they find like similar victims, or like victims in similar circumstances, but the things that are left inside the victims are always different, but always crazy. And they find that there was also someone else like investigating the disappearance of one of the victims, so their investigations obviously like collide, and they do end up working together and trying to figure out like if the victims are connected, and like how they are connected if they are, and obviously who is doing this to them. And yeah, this was, as usual in the series, very gory, very like descriptive, very gruesome, but exactly what I want from it, and also very like thrilling. And like the reveal was also kind of traumatizing of like why the person was doing this. But I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. Then for the death sculpture, they find victims where some of their body parts are used to create sculptures. And so in this case, they not only have to find out like who the victims are and if they're connected, they also need to figure out like what is the meaning of the sculptures, because they're all different, but they're like telling a story. And so they need to figure out what the story is, and like again why the person is doing this. And once again, the reveal of like why this person is doing this, traumatizing. And in this case, like I get it. I don't say like I fully condone what you're doing because it was a crime, but also I get it. So yeah, I also love this one. I actually like this one more than the previous one, and I gave it 4.5 stars. And then the third one, or like technically the 5th one. In this one, like the main character, Hunter, he gets a phone call from a guy that like sends him a link to a broadcast where there is, you know, a person in kind of a cage, and he has to decide on how that person is going to be killed. And then after, you know, that victim dies, there's another link, but for a website that like is open to the public, not just Hunter, where people can vote for the way that people will die. And once again, they need to figure out who the victims are and if they're connected, and who the killer is and why they're doing it. And in this one, there was like a new character helping with the investigation that I really liked, and I really liked the dynamic they brought to the team. And I also really like the main characters, both Hunter and Garcia, who's like his partner. And I definitely did not see the reveal coming, and this book definitely had me stressed out and creeped out, and once again, very gruesome, very descriptive, very just kind of disgusting at times. But yeah, that's exactly what I wanted from it, and also 4.5 stars. Then I read Recursion, which was sci-fi, and this book was actually chosen by a random number generator. And like, this is very confusing to explain because it was very confusing for me to even understand what was happening for a time. So basically, we're following 2 main characters in 2 different timelines. And so we are following Barry in 2018, I think, and he is a detective. In his timeline, there are people suffering from FMS, I think false memory syndrome, where people will like suddenly remember like a whole other life where they have like it's like still their life, they're still the same person, but some circumstances are different. For example, I think the specific person he talked to, like she remembered having a husband and a child, and you know, she didn't actually have that husband and she didn't have any child. And I mean, her husband was like a real person that existed, but he wasn't married to her. He had like a whole other life. And the other character we're following was Helena, and her story was set in 2007, 2008, and she was trying to create a machine that could help people like relieve memories. And obviously the 2 timelines, the 2 storylines, they converge. And I'm not gonna say anything else because I feel like it's better to go into it not knowing anything like other than this. But I really, really liked it. And I definitely had to like pay 100% of my attention to this book, which wasn't a bad thing. Like, it was good. I was like fully immersed into this story, and I had to pay a lot of attention to figure out what was happening. But I thought it was really, really good. And I, like, before we got to the end, or like the last section, I was thinking it could be 5 stars, but then the actual like last part was like insane on another level, and I was like, is this too much, or is it like just enough? And I feel like it was, you know, just a tiny bit like too insane. So I gave it 4.5 stars, which is obviously still a great rating. Like, I still really, really loved it, but you know, it just wasn't full 5 stars. But I still really, really, really love this book. And yeah, it was insane. It was absolutely insane. And then for that same video, I also read The Justice of Kings, which is the first book in the Empire of the Wolf, I think, series, which is fantasy. And we are following like mainly 3 characters, but only like the POV of one of them. And that character we are following the POV of is called Helena, like yet another Helena, for the same video, which I thought was really funny at the time. And she is Von Waldt's clerk. And Von Waldt is a justice, which means that he basically like travels with Helena and the other character also in his group, whose name I don't remember. And they like travel, and he basically brings the emperor's justice, which means that like he makes sure that people are following the laws, basically. And he does have like some powers that are like part of his job. And he like, they get to a town at first that's like following a religion, like the religion that they used to follow before they were, you know, conquered and became part of the empire. They're like still following their religion, but that is like not the law. And so Von Waldt, you know, he technically has to make sure that they are following the law, but this sentence he gives them is like nothing bad. He just tells them like to build a shrine for the new god or whatever. And like one of the people who was traveling with them was like actually not part of their group, but he was traveling with them, and he was like kind of a priest of the new religion, and he was not happy with Von Waldt's decision. And then they move on to another town, and in that town like someone has been killed, and they still haven't figured out who it was. So Von Waldt and his group definitely like get involved in that, and you know, from that like a whole revolution starts. And like we know from the beginning of the book that something has gone wrong, because like Helen is telling us the story, and she's like, we never would have guessed that this is where everything went wrong, kind of thing. Like she says that a lot of times, so like we know that things went like horribly wrong from the beginning of the book. And yeah, there's like a whole revolution starting. And like in the beginning, I was like, what are we doing? Like, what is the plot? Is this like a murder mystery? Because we were in that town where there was that murder mystery for a while, and I was like, is this what the book is about? Because like it didn't sound like it would be, because it's a fantasy, like kind of epic fantasy series, so you know. But then from the like 60% point on, I was absolutely obsessed, because like I knew what was happening for real. And honestly, there were like some fight scenes that were like so gory but so good, or like so gory and so good, because for me, like in fight scenes, being gory is being good. And I also like, I knew that I liked the characters from the beginning, but then when it got like closer to the end, when things started happening to them, I realized I was like even more connected to them than I thought. So yeah, I actually ended up really, really enjoying it. And the ending was wild, and I definitely want to continue with the series, and I give it 4 stars. Then I read The Reappearance of Rachel Price, and this one is a YA mystery thriller, and we were following Belle, who was Rachel's daughter. And in the beginning of the book, they were actually like filming a documentary about Rachel and her disappearance. And like she actually disappeared when Belle was like 2, I think, around 2 years old. And she was actually like there when Rachel disappeared, but she was like very little. She didn't remember anything. And yeah, they were filming that documentary, and then like 25% into the book, Rachel reappeared. Obviously, because that's in the title of the book. But this is like not a short book. This is like pretty long for a mystery thriller. And we spent 25%, which was more than 100 pages, just waiting for what we knew was going to happen because it was in the title, like Rachel reappearing. And like, that's literally what we're doing. Like, I was just waiting for it to happen. And, you know, mystery thrillers are supposed to be fast-paced. If I want a slow-paced book to be waiting for something to happen, I'm not going to choose a mystery thriller. So that was, you know, my first issue with it. And then, you know, Rachel reappeared and she started telling her story, but she said that she didn't really remember things. She never like saw who took her. And then like her story had a lot of inconsistencies and Belle was investigating, and I just felt like it was too long. Like, I did like Belle as our main character. I did like the story overall. I did like the reveal, but I just feel like it was a little too long. But overall, like, it was still an enjoyable time, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Then I read King of Scars, which was also for like the random number generator video thing. And this was the first book in the King of Scars duology, but the sixth, I think, in the Grishaverse, and it's a fantasy. And, you know, I don't really want to get too much into the plot because I would be spoiling like some of the things that happened in the Shadow and Bone trilogy. But we are following actually like my favorite character from that trilogy, who's Nikolai. And, you know, I was excited because it was following that character that I loved, but at the same time, like, I had seen some mixed reviews for it, so I was cautiously excited. And we're actually following also a character from the Six of Crows books that I really liked. So, you know, it had everything to go right, like, for me to love, but I didn't love it because I was bored, honestly. Like, I did like being back into that world and being back with those characters, but the actual plot, I was bored. And the like evil force that they were fighting wasn't exciting at all. So yeah, definitely like I said, liked being back in the world and with the characters that I already liked, but it was just okay. Like, I was a little bored and it was just okay, and I gave it 3 stars. And honestly, I don't even know if I want to read the next and like final book. So there's that. Then I read Everyone Who Can Forgive Me Is Dead, which was another mystery thriller. And in this one, we're following Charlie. And when she was in college, she was like the sole survivor and the only witness of the Scarlet Christmas, which was something that happened where some of her friends, like college friends, were killed. And like I said, she was the only witness. But she had actually lied because she didn't truly remember what had happened. And now, like, in the present, she, like, her life was pretty good, but she learned that someone was actually making a movie about the Scarlet Christmas, and so she was worried that her secrets would come out. And basically we learned, like, what actually happened that night. And honestly, like, I've read similar things that were better, so I didn't really like it that much. And since it wasn't actually like gripping me throughout the story, I was still hoping that the reveal wasn't gonna be what seemed obvious that it was gonna be, but it actually was what was obvious that it was gonna be. So I didn't like the story, and I also didn't like the reveal. So this one sadly didn't work for me, and I gave it 2 stars. Then I read The Long Walk, which was a horror dystopian, and we were following Ray, and he, along with 99 other boys, were participating in the Long Walk, which is a walk where, you know, the person who lasted the longest would get anything they wanted. Like, whatever they asked for, they would get it. And it's 100 boys that participate, and they have to like keep a certain pace. And if they fall behind, they have 3 warnings. And if they do get like all those 3 warnings, they die, basically. And we are following like, I mean, we're following just Ray, but we get to know the other boys that he talks to as well. And I didn't love it. Like, I guess this was more about the message than anything else. But as like an entertainment source, I wasn't entertained. Like, it was, I didn't hate it either, but I didn't love it. Like, it was just okay. And the thing is, I never really understood, like, why those boys would sign up for this, which I guess is kind of the point, like why? But like why? You know, like what even was the point of this whole thing? You know, I wasn't very entertained. In this case, like the goriness didn't do it for me because it was just kind of pointless, I guess. And yeah, it was okay. Like I didn't hate it. Like I said, I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. Then I read Leviathan Falls and The Sins of Our Fathers, which were books 9 and 9.5 in the Expand series. And like this was the end of the series. And this is a science fiction series that I absolutely loved. And this is set like many years in the future, and it's set like when humans have moved on from living just on Earth, they live in other planets as well. And there is like these books always have like a political plotline and also a plotline that's more associated with like a biological threat that then we learn is like way more than that. But I obviously don't want to spoil anything, but I love this book so much. Like I was obsessed with both plot lines from page 1, and I loved everything about this. And like I love the main characters in the series so much, like the main crew that we're following. I love them with all my heart. I felt all the feelings with this book, honestly. And the ending was definitely like bittersweet, but I feel like it was the perfect ending for this series specifically. And so yeah, I literally love everything about this. Like I have no complaints. 5 stars. And then The Sins of Our Fathers was the novella that came after this, and we were actually following a character that was related to one of the characters of the main crew in this series, and it was definitely fun to see them again. And they were in another planet, and they were dealing with like the wildlife of that planet, like the native wildlife, and also with a bunch of humans that were assholes. And yeah, we saw them navigate all that, and at the same time still trying to get over some of the trauma they had from things that we had seen in the main novels. And yeah, that was also very fun to see that character again and to be with them. And I give that one 4 stars. Then I read Elantris, The Hope of Elantris, and The Emperor's Soul. And so those were all fantasy books. Those were all part of the Cosmere universe. And so in Elantris, which is like the biggest book of them all, we were following 3 POVs basically. And like in that world, Elantris used to be like a very important city, and the people of that city, the Elantrians, they were seen as gods almost, because people, like random people, they would one day wake up and have like these magical abilities, these amazing powers, and all those people would like be Elantrians, and like they would move to Elantris. But one day, out of nowhere, like those powers, they kind of became a curse, and so Elantrians now were kind of cursed, and still people turn into Elantrians, but now it's not a good thing, and Elantris is like closed off from the world. And basically like now Elantrians, not only do they not really have their magic, they're like dead, like their body is decaying, and yeah, it's a curse. And one of the characters we're following is Rayoden, and he is the prince of the town like right outside of Elantris. And he, like in the first chapter, wakes up one day and he has become an Elantrian. So he is taken to Elantris and just thrown in there. And then another person we're following is Serene, who is a princess from another kingdom, and she was going to Rayoden's city because she was going there to marry him. And you know, when she gets there, she learns that he has died, but according to their contracts, even if he died, they would still be married. So technically, like, she's married to him, she's a widow, and she is the princess of that place. And the other character we're following is Raven, who is a priest who has also gone there to try to convert people to his religion, and he hates the Elantrians. And we see that Rayoden is, trying to help the Elantrians, find purpose in their new life, and at the same time Serene is trying to help like the people from the city because the whole city is a mess and like the king is horrible. And obviously all those paths, all those plot lines, they converge. And we also see Rayoden like trying to figure out what went wrong with the Elantrian's magic, and I really liked it. I thought the plot was so interesting and like the magic system was so cool. And I also really, really liked both Serini and Rayoden. And Raiden, I definitely didn't like him, but he was surely an interesting character. And yeah, I also thought like the pacing was so good. Like since the 20% mark, maybe, which was when I like got a grasp of what was happening, I was like obsessed. And I had a lot of fun with this book. I really, really liked it. And I gave it 4.5 stars. And then The Hope of Elantris was a short story that was basically like we saw the conflict, like the fight at the end of Elantris, but from another POV and like in another place, which was also really interesting. And I did really like this new character as well that we were following, but like it was really, really short. I can't say anything other than this, but I also really like this one. And I gave it 4 stars. And then The Emperor's Soul, like it's set in the same world as Elantris, but it's not like related to the story. But we were following Shai, and she is a forger, and she was in prison. And she like being a forger basically means that with her magic she can like turn a substance into another, like an object into another. And in that place, like the emperor was attacked and they were able to like heal his body but not his mind. And so they want Shai to forge him a new mind or a new soul in 100 days. And if she does that, they will grant her her freedom. And so we see her like working on that, trying to learn who the emperor was, to try to build him a new mind. And this one was also very interesting. The magic was also really cool. And Shai was also a really, really cool character to follow. And yeah, I also do enjoy this one. I don't know if I said this one was a novella, so also like pretty short. And I also gave this one 4 stars. Then I read Out, which was a mystery thriller. And in this one, we were following a group of 4 women who worked at a factory of like packaged meals in Tokyo. And one of them, like one time when they get to their shift, she tells them that her husband hit her. And then the next shift, she tells them that they had like a pretty big fight and she actually killed him. And so her colleagues, like the other 3, they do like make a deal with her and they take care of the body. And then there's also like a lot of crime in the area of the factory where they work. And we actually follow the POV of 2 men that are like kind of related to that part of the crime in the area. And basically like this story follows like the women and to see if like they get away with it, and also how the other storylines and like how the men are connected or like connect with their story as well. And in the beginning I was definitely very invested, and the characters like they were not very likable, but I think that was the point. And I mean, there was one of them that like she had a very interesting, very intriguing past, and she was definitely my favorite as well. And yeah, like I was saying, I was very interested in the beginning, and I also did like the actual end, but the section leading up to the end, I didn't love it. And also I had like some issues with the writing, and I don't know if it's because it was translated or specifically because it was translated into Portuguese, and everything sounds more awkward in Portuguese. It just does to me. So that might definitely be the issue, but I still did enjoy it. Like I still had a good time. I was entertained. I was, curious to see what was gonna happen. And overall, I did enjoy it, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Then I read the Gilded Ones, which is the first book in the Deathless trilogy, which is fantasy. And in this one, we were following Deika, and she is, I think she had like just turned 16, and that means that she had to go through the purity ritual, which is a ritual that girls go through when they turn 16. And basically, it's determined by the color of their blood if they are pure or not. And actually, like, I think it was the day before the ritual or something like that, some creatures attack the town. The creatures are called death shrieks, and Deika was actually able to control them, like the creatures. Like she told them to stop and like not attack someone, and like they listened to her and they stop. And then when we get to the ritual, like obviously her blood is not red, her blood is gold, which means that she is not pure. And so the people from her town, like they take her and they torture her because they, extract actual gold from her blood. So they're there torturing her. But then a woman appears that basically rescues her, and she's gonna take her to be part of an army that is being built to fight the death shrieks, because people like her are the only people like strong enough to fight the death shrieks. And actually she's stronger than the rest of them. She has like some extra powers that the others don't. And so we see Deika, practicing, learning how to fight, and also learning more about her and like people that are similar to her and like where they actually came from. And I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. Like I definitely wanted to learn more about the world and the magic and the creatures than we did. Although we did learn like a bit more at the end, like I wanted even more, and I'm guessing I will learn more in the next books, but like I wanted more, And also I was a bit bored in the middle. Like I was excited and interested in the beginning, and I also did really like the ending. I thought the ending was really cool, and also like the reveal. Although I figured most of it out like pretty early on, I still did like that, that's what was happening. And the part I didn't guess, I also did really enjoy. But, in the middle, I was a little bored, but I still did enjoy it overall. And I want to continue with the series as well. And I gave this one 3.5 stars. Then I read Just Like Mother, which was a horror thriller. And we were following Maeve. And when she was a kid, she was like part of a cult. And now that she was an adult, she actually reconnects with her cousin who used to be in the cult with her, but they had like lost all communication throughout like their lives until now. I think they're like in their 30s, and they reconnect. But her cousin and like her friends and the company that they have is all about like fertility, and they're all obsessed to like having children. And Maeve doesn't have children, nor does she want to, so they definitely like judge her for that. And the company of like her cousin, it also seems very cultish, and the vibe was definitely exactly what I wanted it to be, which was very creepy and very, like I said, cultish. And also at times it kind of felt like a fever dream, because Maeve was not, she was like under something. So it was definitely very creepy, and I was really enjoying it. But and like what's like she went through was absolutely terrifying, actually. And like I was gonna give it a high rating. I was thinking of giving it 4 stars, but then at the end, like there was something I really loved about the ending, but there was also something I really didn't like about the ending. So I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. But again, overall, I still enjoyed it, and like the vibe throughout the whole book was absolutely perfect for me. Then I read Those Empty Eyes, which was a mystery thriller, and we were following Alex. And at the start of the book, her family, like her parents and her brother, they are attacked, and they actually are killed in their home. But Alex is the sole survivor because she actually manages to hide from the killer. But then people, since she was the only survivor of her family, people think that she was actually the one who killed her family. And so not only was like, did she lose her family, she was also seen as the one who did it. And even though like it was proven later that she was innocent, like people still hated her and like threatened her and stalked her and just made her life miserable. And like it fast forward 2 years, and we see that she's trying to investigate who did that to her family. But then we fast forward 8 more years, and things are like completely different. And Alex is living life like she is still investigating in the background, but she's just things are different. And then we move on to like a whole other case of like a girl in college that was about to expose a story about like sexual assault in campus, and then she's killed, and then the story is about her and like who killed her. I mean, obviously, like in the end, everything's connected, but I don't know. Like, I was way more invested in the story in the beginning, like about Alex, and then I was just like, what even is the plot? Because for a while, we had no plot. Like, we weren't following a case, and the other hadn't happened yet. So I was like, what are we doing? So yeah, like the reveal was definitely interesting, and like the last chapter, I really, really, really liked. But for a while there, I was like, what are we doing? So it was okay. I gave it 3 stars. And then the last book that I read was the Invocations, which is fantasy horror. And this was actually one of my anticipated releases, but I was procrastinating reading it because I was afraid I wasn't gonna love it. But in this one, we followed 3 girls. So we had Jude, and she was kind of like possessed by a demon, but not really, because like the demon didn't like take over her. So it's not like the possession that we usually think of, but she did have a demon in her body, and it was like feeding off her, and it was killing her, and like her soul was decaying, and so was her body technically, and she wanted to find a witch who could help her solve that problem. And then we also had Zara, whose sister had been killed, and she wanted to bring her sister back to life, and you know, she could also use a witch to help her with that. And then finally we had Emma, who was a witch. And so, you know, the 3 girls, like their storylines converge obviously, and then Emma finds out that a bunch of women who have been dying, they were all like her clients, and so the 3 of them start investigating to figure out why those women are being killed and like who's killing them. And I did love this book. Like, I loved it so much. I absolutely loved the vibe. It was very creepy, very witchy, very gory, very kind of gross. And it does say here in the back that it has body horror, which I do love some body horror. And yeah, like I loved it. And I also did really, really like the characters. And there was even like a subtle romance subplot that I enjoyed. And I never liked romance. So that says something. And yeah, like it was just my perfect kind of book. You know, it had everything that I like. It had everything that I wanted it to have. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. It was perfect for me, and I give it 5 stars. So we definitely finished on a high note. Like, this was a great last book. So yeah, those were the 21 books that I read in the last 3 months. Overall, it was great. I didn't really have many books that I didn't enjoy, and I definitely had a few that I really, really loved. So very successful, I would say. And yeah, that is it. That is everything for this video. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you have enjoyed it, and if you did, give it a like and subscribe, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!